All right, so a lot of people are dealing with landlord tenant issues in this country and are finding out very quickly that there is a thing as squatters' rights. There is a such thing as that. I found out the hard way myself. I had rented a condo when I separated and divorced from my son's father, and the condo was absolutely beautiful. It was stunning, but I realized that that particular lifestyle wasn't for me. So I purchased a single family home and decided to rent the condo with the hopes of providing my son some type of financial security in the future, building an asset, kind of paying it forward with him and building that generational wealth that we all talk about. I quickly learned after renting it. The first tenant for a year was absolutely amazing. She paid on time every time. She didn't really have any issues, and when she did, I fixed it. We resolved it, and it was absolutely great. Now the condo was beautiful, so it was kind of renovated already and new when these people were renting it. So that was great. The second tenant a year later was problematic from the beginning, and I ignored the signs because I followed my heart, not really being the business savvy person that I wasn't. I followed my heart. She came in with her sob story about her and her three kids needing a place to stay, and they needed it almost right away. She came to view the property, and she wanted to sign pretty quickly. It was near the holidays. I think it was Thanksgiving, or yeah, it was near Thanksgiving, and it was near the holidays. And so she came, she viewed the property, we went over everything. She wanted to sign right away. She told me that she would give me the deposit the next day. And so I forgot exactly how that went. This was in 2019, before COVID. I forgot exactly how that went, but somehow she ended up signing. She told me she would pay the deposit the next day or two. I forgot exactly. The deposit was late. So there was an excuse as to why she couldn't pay it late. So here we are. We're now in a written contract that I found online. This is before I could cross-reference it with ChatGPT. I just found like a generic form on, online, a lease agreement online. And so then she paid the deposit partially. That's what it was. She paid the deposit partially, but it was also supposed to be 1 month rent. That was late. The next month, I believe, was on time, but the following month was late. And so we kind of started off on this foot of me accepting late payments, her providing late payments, and me not saying anything because there was an excuse of why it wasn't being paid on time. And so that continued for a while, and then COVID hit. When COVID hit, the town that I live in actually posted on its website that now all of a sudden the residents of this particular town needed a license agreement, a renter's license in order to rent. And so she must have found this out behind my back, unbeknownst to me. Again, who's checking a town website, especially during COVID when people are losing jobs and families and they're scared for their life. And so she found this out. What that means is that if I did not obtain that license, then I technically, legally could not rent. I could not rent my unit, my property, without that renter's license. Which was $250, and what that involves is you applying for the license, the town having someone come out to inspect the property to make sure that it is livable conditions, and that you're not like a slumlord. And then when they approve when the person goes back to the town, they say yes, this property is acceptable, and so they then grant the license. The license is valid for 2 years. Again, this happened during COVID. I had no idea. The lady started renting from me in November of 2019. So we're like on the cusp of COVID. So COVID hits. She continues to be late, sometimes 2 months late. There are text messages. Now, one thing I did know from working with an attorney back in my younger years is put everything in writing. So that's one thing that I do know. Well, when it came time after COVID for me to really try to get her out of the property, I realized that I could not go down to the court to file paperwork against her until I gave her a 10-day notice. So that was a new rule that was implemented during COVID. You must give tenants 10 days to let them know that you even plan to go to the court. So here's the problem with that. They know they're late. You know they're late. But you must still say, hey, you're late on your payment, and I'll give you 10 days before I even go file any paperwork with the court. Knowing that when you file, there's going to be another week or two, or in some cases, in some counties, 6 months, 3 months before the court even makes a date for eviction. So I learned this the hard way, and then she hit me with, when I went to the court and, gave her the notices, she hit me with, well, you're not even licensed. So you technically can't not only rent to me, but you're not supposed to be collecting rent from me, because legally you're not supposed to be renting at all. So that was a big ordeal. She ended up becoming a squatter. At the end of the day, she ended up getting away with not paying 6 months rent. And it took me about a year to get her out of my property. It was terrible. It was absolutely horrible, and it made me not want to ever rent again. I did end up renting one. It made me not want to rent again, but I was not really in a position to sell it because, mind you, I'm 6 months in the hole from renting to her. I had expenses that had accumulated, so I decided to go with the property management company instead of renting it myself, and just to kind of hold on to it and kind of get myself away from that situation a little bit. And then a year later, I ended up selling the property. That was a whole ordeal, and that is me just explaining to you the complications of being a landlord. It's not all pretty. Even if you think that you are the best landlord in the land and you have the best rental property compared to a lot of others in the area, it's newly renovated, people will still get over on you if they can. And a lot of landlords are finding out very quickly that squatter rights and situations are real, and that a lot of the laws don't necessarily protect landlords. Maybe because we have so many cases of greedy people or corporations being slumlords and renting unideal conditions to tenants. But in cases where you are just a person trying to generate wealth for your family or have an asset, it really bites you in the butt. So in this particular video, we are going to talk about becoming a landlord, and here is what you are legally agreeing to when you agree to do so. I will eventually do a video on the tenant side, because I've been a tenant before I was a landlord. So we'll do that, but this particular video talks about what you're agreeing to. So the core agreement that you're making as a landlord is not just collecting rent or you're entering a legal agreement to provide housing that meets the minimum safety, health, and habitability standards. Habitability. It's on the screen. So this is often called the applied warranty of habitability, which means the property must be livable at all times. And that's reasonable. That's great. You are agreeing that the tenants will have access to essential services. And I did have to make sure, while she was squatting, the HVAC went out and I had to repair it. That hurt my soul because she didn't have any AC, and that hurt my soul. I wanted to turn the water off. I wanted to let the HVAC, I wanted her to steam and leave my property, but I couldn't. So they have to have running water, heat, electricity, and safe structural conditions. Even if it's not written in the lease agreement, courts generally treat this as automatic and enforceable. So they also have the right, tenants also have the right to quiet enjoyment, meaning that you cannot enter the property without giving a 24-hour or a reasonable notice, except for in emergencies. That also hurt my soul. Uh, so you are agreeing to, in terms of housing conditions, maintain the property in a safe and functional condition. So that means keeping up the plumbing, electrical systems, heating, and structural elements in working order. If something breaks that affects livability, you are responsible for fixing it within a reasonable time frame. Now, the heating is the most important. I mentioned that I had to fix the AC. Technically, AC does not fall under that, but because I was not licensed, and because she was hanging that over my head in court, I wanted to provide any reason. I didn't want to give her anything. Okay, because I realized very quickly that she had a lot more rights than I realized. Now, I was slow to getting it fixed. I was very slow because I knew that it wasn't necessary. But I was on my end trying to kind of overcompensate for the fact that she's not living in a slum. I don't know if that hurt or helped me to this day, but I know that it was record breaking temperatures, and she was claiming it was hot and whatever. So anyway, but heating, yes, heating would be something that would be very prominent, and you must provide the tenant with at all times. So if you fail to meet these obligations, tenants may legally withhold rent, request repairs through the court, or even terminate the lease under certain conditions. In my case, because she was sitting pretty and it was a nice place, she was not going anywhere. Um, so so leasing it yourself versus a property management company. I tried to lease it myself because I thought that people genuinely will be good people and good tenants. I didn't even think about having a property management company as a middleman. But if you self-manage, then obviously you're responsible for everything. And so that includes drafting the lease. That includes screening the tenants. That's something I did not do. I can admit that that entire situation was my fault. Again, she started off crossing a boundary that I should have enforced with the late payments. I just looked at her application, didn't call to verify anyone. And as a matter of fact, as we were going through the legal process, I saw she halfway filled out everything. All I did was look at her W-2s, saw that she was able to pay. And that's pretty much it. My fault. It was that was absolutely my fault. So, but if you decide to lease it yourself, please screen the tenant. That's one thing I would do differently. You're also responsible for collecting the rent, handling the maintenance, and responding to any complaints, complying with housing laws, and managing eviction processes. So that means that when she failed to pay, I was responsible for providing her the 10-day notice. I was responsible for going to the court to file the paperwork. That is time off work. That is time away from your house. That is also added stress. Being present for the court date, hiring an attorney, all of those things fall on you when you decide to lease the property yourself. So it also means that you are agreeing to understand and follow all applicable laws, even if you are not aware of them. I didn't know is not a valid legal defense. And I can tell you firsthand notice when I stepped into the court and I was like, I don't know. The judge looked at me like, okay. When I called the town and said, y'all put this up during COVID apparently on your website, no notice, no email to me, no letter or anything, you know it's a rental property because I did my due diligence and told the HOA, but no notice was sent to me. And she was like, yeah, we just put it on the website, but that is still your duty to know. So just letting you know that. But if you use a property management company, you are hiring a third party to act on your behalf. in these cases, but you are not removing your legal responsibility. So the management company handles day-to-day operations like tenant communication, maintenance coordination, and rent collection. However, you are still ultimately responsible for ensuring that the property complies with the laws and the regulations set forth in your county, in your district, in your state. You are agreeing to a management contract, which usually they will take the fee. I think my property management company took a 10% fee. And it has liability clauses within that. So you make sure you want to read that. I might do another video, since we are clear terms of service. I might do another video on what generally their liability clauses state. Some contracts allow the company to make repair decisions up to a certain dollar amount without your approval. So yes, I did. My management company, when I finally got one, they wanted at least like $500 set aside in case there are repairs, so that they can then legally say if the tenant calls at 1 or 2 in the morning and something's broke, they can pull from that stash and then just inform me about it later. So under federal law, when you rent your property out, you agree to comply with the Fair Housing Act. This means you cannot discriminate against tenants based on protected characteristics like race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. You are also agreeing to provide reasonable accommodations for tenants with disabilities. So if you have a no pet policy and they have a service animal, you cannot discriminate. That is a service animal, especially if it's registered. Violations of federal laws can result in lawsuits, fines, and penalties. That should be no surprise to you. So under Maryland, we're going to stick with Maryland law. Eviction is a formal legal process. You agree not to remove a tenant yourself. So it was very difficult for me to have to go through the situation I went through, knowing that I could not enter my property without a reasonable notice, even though she was squatting in my property. I could not remove any of her things. I could not turn off the water, I couldn't do anything. I had to basically let her live there and not touch anything. I couldn't change the locks. You cannot change the locks, and that is in, I think, almost every state, if not every state. You cannot change the locks. You will get in big trouble. And then surely the judge will rule in their favor for whether not paying or staying for a little bit more. So you cannot shut off utilities or force them out. You must go through the court. You must file first a failure to pay rent in the district court, and obtain a judgment. Now, one thing that I will say that I learned in my process is that when the judge granted me the judgment that basically, yes, failure to pay, she had 10 days. Was it 10 or 3? She had some days to appeal that. That irritated my soul, because why, if she's squatting, I had already had to give her 10-day notice that I was going to file. I already had to wait for a court date after the 10-day notice. So now then I go file, and then they give me a court date that's 2 weeks out. And then, so I waited 2 weeks, and then you agree with me. Why does she still have, I think it was 7 to 10 days to appeal? That blew my mind. That blew my mind. So when a tenant, after a court ruling, only a sheriff or authorized official can officially remove the tenant. So if that person does not appeal the judgment, then it goes to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff will then schedule an eviction. So that could be another, however busy they are, it could be another week, another month, or another whatever. The whole mind you, all the while your mortgage company is saying, pay me. Okay, so please understand you are you are still responsible for this stuff. So when you become a landlord, you're agreeing to take on that financial risk. Again, the mortgage company is saying, pay us. So this includes the unpaid rent, the property damage. Luckily, she did not leave any damage. Legal fees, and I spent about $5K in legal fees. And maintenance cost. You are responsible for complying with security deposit laws. So, yeah, when she left, I had to, it was like she put some type of liquid all over the water. I had to get the walls cleaned and replaced. There were some other things. Her security deposit was not much. And you are responsible for putting it in an interest-bearing account, so it accrued a little bit of interest. But at the end of the day, the damage that she did do that cost the most was she damaged the garage door. It looks like she tried to lift it while it was locked, and it bent the top, and I had to get that replaced. So I was able to write off her security deposit. But if your tenant leaves and they made no damage, you still owe them that security deposit plus the interest that it accrued while they were living there. So when you become a landlord, you have to do all of these things. It's not necessarily as passive of an income as people think it is. It's a legal contract with ongoing obligations, and whether you know the rules or not, you're still agreeing to follow them. And I think that this video really is intended for those that are thinking about ways to create money. And you can just search on the internet the amount of people who are really just trying to build wealth for them or their family, and they have to deal with tenant nightmares. So I hope this was helpful for you. I will eventually do a tenant, what they agree to video, and property management and all of those things. But hopefully this helped someone understand what they're agreeing to when they become a landlord. Until next time, talk to you later. Bye.